Hello and welcome back, everybody, to the Remembrancers Library podcast. I'm Vincent, and unfortunately, my lovely co-host Ethan will not be here with us for the next couple of episodes, I believe. He is taking a short break as his schoolwork is the priority right now, and he's very busy with that. But he will be back as soon as he is able, and we will continue on with our regularly scheduled nonsense. Yep, that sounds about right. Anyways, today I'm going to be picking up where we left off last week after talking about what was going on with Lionel Johnson, as well as his second-in-command Luther, and all of that stuff there. Today we're shifting over to another corner of the universe. We are going to be focusing mostly on some stuff going on in the Ultramar section. Now, this is where Guilliman is from, the Ultramarines, all of that jazz. This is his own sector of the galaxy called Ultramar. And the battle that we're going to be looking at today is the Battle of Calth, which was the next in the series of exterminations by Horus, as you would say, of the loyalist Primarchs, the ones that he knew wouldn't be turning traitor anytime soon. So this was the next planned extermination for Horus to get rid of Guilliman, and he would use Lorgar to do so. Before I jump right into the entire episode, I just want to say thank you again, everybody, for being here. If you're here on the YouTube, thank you so much for being there. Give us a like, give us a follow, or a subscribe, and leave us a comment if you have thoughts and feelings you want to share, if you've got any questions, anything like that. It really helps us to hear from you guys, and then we know what you want to hear about. If you're on the Spotify, drop us a like, give us a download. That really does help us out. And of course, as always, give us a share if you know anyone who might like this stuff, anyone else who you think would like listening to us ramble about nerd stuff for hours on end. It always makes us happy to see more people joining the community. But with that, I digress. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and I will get on with the episode. Alright, so like I said, the Battle of Calth that we're talking about today was Horus's plan to eliminate or severely cripple the Ultramarines and Guilliman. After the Istvan massacres, as I said, Guilliman is still the strongest of all of the Primarchs in terms of numbers. He has the largest legion force in numbers of all of the brothers, and Horus knew that he was going to be a really tough opponent. He didn't want to have to fight them just in open combat. He knew that wasn't going to go well. So when he started strategically sort of spreading out his brothers post him becoming the War Master, he had ordered Guilliman to muster as many of his Marines as he possibly could on a planet called Calth, which was sort of on the fringes of the Viridian system within the Ultramar sector. And the reason that Horus had this order sent out was because they were allegedly anticipating a secondary orc incursion just after the Ulanor campaign and the defeat of the Wa boss. Now, the sort of interesting part here comes in where Horus also had Lorgar go to support Guilliman as well. And it is important to remember that Lorgar and Guilliman have had conflict sort of in the past already. When sort of near the tail end of the Great Crusade, the Emperor finally got wind at how much sort of religious heresy Lorgar was doing on all the planets that he was conquering, and finally got sick and tired of it. So he summoned Lorgar back to Terra, had Lorgar and all of the Marines that had accompanied get on their knee, and he basically ripped them a new one for promoting the ideology that the Emperor was the god of mankind. With that, to teach Lorgar a lesson, he also sent Guilliman to go to Lorgar's home planet, Clotius, and raise the capital city Monarchia, which is where Lorgar grew up. So there's already a little bit of hostility going on here, and Guilliman and other people viewing this whole situation externally sort of saw it as a political power move from Horus, sort of to have the brothers be forced to work together to sort out their differences, hopefully, and that maybe Guilliman's goodness would rub off on Lorgar's sort of, what's the word I want here? He's gone down a wrong path, and hopefully being around Guilliman will set him straight, sort of thing. And regardless of all of this, Guilliman was completely oblivious to any notion that maybe Lorgar had it in for him just a little bit, or that anything suspicious was going on, even though there were quite a lot of red flags popping up here and there with the way that the word bearers were acting, the way that Lorgar was acting. There were definitely red flags there, but unfortunately they would not go noticed until the very last minute, and it was too late to do anything about it. So I guess that is sort of all we need for exposition, so I will get into the beginning phases of the battle here now. The timeline for this battle is a little bit wonky. There is things happening that are all kind of happening on top of one another. There's back and forth. There's some things that people didn't find out until a lot later. So I'm going to try my very best to keep this cohesive. But the one thing that we know for sure is that Guilliman called Mark Zero the official beginning of the battle, when there was actually combat between the two brothers on purpose. We're not going to start at Mark Zero, though. We are going to take a look about 136 hours before Mark Zero. So a couple days before the battle officially started. As the word bearers were getting to Calth, there was an Imperial fleet ship called the Campanile, as there was also some just standard Imperial army coming to Calth to help out as well. So the word bearers, with the element of surprise boarding the ship, were able to slaughter absolutely everybody on board, which included about 3,700 men, give or take. That included the shipmaster, the captain, their navigator, and an entire Imperial Army regiment. The the system control for Calth did sort of notice that something was a little bit off. The ship's course started to change. It wasn't coming in exactly how it was supposed to. But because there were such large numbers of ships coming to Calth at this time, there wasn't really time to investigate right away. They just sort of flagged it as maybe something to check back in on later. And yeah, because the course went off and also the Vox comms went down. There was no communication to or from the ship at this point, as everybody on board is dead and the word bearers are now trying to, get their stuff sorted out. And the the system control would eventually get in contact with the Campanile again, but by that point the word bearers had everything under control. The Vox comms were back up. I'm not 100% sure how they got away with, having the communication and not being suspicious of anything, but either way, they got the Vox comms back up, they put the ship back on course, and the system control dropped the flag that there was anything wrong, and that would have very big consequences, which we will get to in just a moment here. So around the same time, the rest of the word bearers are arriving on Calth as well. There's a huge amount of fleet ships that are all docking in the orbital shipyards, but there's also ground troops that are being deployed as well. This is including legionnaires, human auxiliary, titans, and the fact that there was ground troops going down could have been a little bit of a red flag also, because of the timing that the word bearers arrived, it was sort of right before they were anticipating this battle against the orcs to start. So it doesn't really make sense for them to deploy all the ground troops and then just have them get back up in their ships and go off to this battle now. But it was seen as sort of like a solidarity between the brothers. They were standing together, mustering together. So that was not really any cause for concern either. 60 hours before Mark Zero, now we're getting a little bit closer, of the ground troops of the word bearers, there were small bands of the cultists, and in their camps, they started chaos rituals. And these were just to start causing havoc all over the planet, just sort of subtly throwing things off and starting to work things in their favor. Now, the Ultramarines, there was like a very faint sound of all of the chanting that was going on that was coming up over their vox comms, but they didn't really, they couldn't quite make it out, so they just chalked it up to a solar distortion, I believe, just overlapping rays just causing some background static, so that went unnoticed. And there were Ultramarines here that had been Psychers. Well, they still would have been Psychers, they still would have been connected to the warp by this point, but as we know, after the battle, or not the Battle of Nicaea, the Council of Nicaea, it was illegal for them to practice or use their connections to the warp. But any of these Ultramarines that did have sort of that connection, they were starting to get headaches from all of the chaos energy that was being summoned. But they were so afeared of further persecution that nobody mentioned anything. None of these Psychers would communicate amongst themselves or to their superiors. So this went the fact that these rituals are starting in the background here also is being sort of ignored. Now, getting closer now to Mark Zero. I'm not sure exactly the timeline of this, but there was a Magos. His name was Ul-Kehal Hest. He was the overseer of Calth's weapons grid. He was plugged directly into the main server, and he was sort of he had a bunch of people working, or Magos, robot people, working with him to hold the defense and the weapons and all of that, the shields around Calth, all of that, maintaining that. So this Magos noticed that there was a foreign scrap code that was starting to work its way into the computers, the cogitators, that those specific computers that were for Calth's defense network. So just a quick sidebar here, scrap code is also called Lingua Diabolis. It's a type of warp-infested computer virus, and this can affect any type of machinery, whether that's a Titan, whether that's a Knight, whether it's a cogitator, something as simple as just an earpiece Voxcom. Regardless, if it's a machine and it works mechanically, can be infested with this virus. And this virus was the direct result of these chaos rituals that were going on, specifically a branch of the word bearers called the Brotherhood of the Knife. They were an auxiliary branch, but it was specifically these guys that were specifically creating this scrap code. And when it finally had fully matured, I guess you could say, it was completely fleshed out and it was fully settled into Calth's defense network. It was known as the Octed. That was the name of this virus. And yeah, so that's it. It's sitting, it's not really doing much at this exact moment, but it has been noticed by one of the Magos. About an hour before Mark Zero, everybody's favorite First Chaplain Erebus. A round of applause, everybody, for First Chaplain Erebus. I'm kidding, we hate this guy. Throw some tomatoes at him or something. An hour before Mark Zero, Erebus arrives on Calth. He pops up, he's teleported in. There's some landscape that was just north of the capital city, Numinous, of Calth. This place was called the Satric Plateau. And Erebus pops up on this spot, and he starts his own ritual to work to bolster with the rest of the rituals that are going on here. And this is sort of these things are all in play just before the battle. So now we're getting down to the wire. In the last few minutes before Guilliman notes Mark Zero, that ship that is now entirely piloted by word bearers, they had slowly, in all of the chaos that was going on with all of the ships and whatnot, they sneak the Campanile through Calth's outer layers of defense and is getting closer in to the main shipyards of the planet. And the word bearers here charted, I don't know if you can say charted a course, but they pointed the ship in the direction they wanted, and they cranked up the engine and sent it to not quite full light speed, the fastest that they could get this ship to go before it would hit light speed. And they're just zooming closer to everybody here. At the same time, on an ultramarine cruiser that was called the Samothrace, there was a word-bearer's captain. His name was Sorat Chure. He would turn on some of the ultramarines, specifically Captain Lucille and all of his men, and Chure slaughtered them all on sight with the element of surprise to get him that advantage. I believe that he killed 18 men, and these Marines and captains were seen as the first official casualties, even though the battle technically hasn't started and an entire crew has already been slaughtered. So back to the Campanile, it shoots straight through Calth's main shipyard. Just great balls of fire straight through. In 2 seconds, this is all that it takes, in 2 seconds, thousands of lives were lost, and a large number of the warships that had gathered were destroyed. The impact of the Campanile hitting the space yard, it resulted in a huge electromagnetic pulse, and any of the ships that had survived the initial impact, their servers, their computers, everything was fried by this pulse. And the scrap code has fully ramped up in Cal's weapons grid. So with this electromagnetic pulse coming towards the planet as well as the scrap code, the defense system, the weapons grid is completely shut down now. And there's like chaos erupts. A quick sidebar back to that Magos that I mentioned, Magos Hest. This, if you're reading the books, if you're reading the novels, this is directly from No Fear. So if you're reading that, then maybe skip ahead a little bit, but also this is all just part of the plot anyways. So that Magos, as I said before, he was plugged directly into the main server, the defense grid, right? And that's been fried. So he, by extension, is fried, and not in the fun way. He is mortally wounded. He does survive, but he's mortally wounded. He's still connected, but he's going to have to be separated from the machinery here at this point. And in his last few moments, he decides that he wants his prodigy, another Magos by the name of Mir Edvitarwin, to take his place and do absolutely whatever she can to restore the grid, to restore the shields, all of that good stuff, even if it would be at the cost of his own life. She did want to try to save his life, but in the seconds that it took for her to process all of that, there was another ship that was headed directly towards them. I'm not sure if this was another ship that the word bearers had taken over and was sending toward them directly, or if this is just a ship that's falling out of orbit. But this ship was called the Antrodamicus, the Antrodamicus ship. It was coursed directly towards them as well. So in the panic of trying to get out of the way to survive, Hest they had to just cut him right off without following proper protocol, and he did not survive that. He did, however, in his last few moments, he was able to, because he noticed the scrap code early enough, he was able to create a kill code that would be able to shut down the scrap code. And in his last few minutes, he finalized that and shot it off to a secure cogitator that was on the planet somewhere, like a backed up VPN. It was a secure spot, and he knew that Tauren, with the help of some loyalists, would be able to find it. And yeah, that was the end of Hest, but Tauren is on the case. So, and like I said, we're still in the last 20 minutes before Mark Zero. but within 10 seconds of the Campanile causing the impact in the space yard, a fleet of word bearers that were on the ground, some of these ground troops, would turn... Or sorry, no, not the ground troops. The fleet of word bearers, their ships, the ships that are all docked around, turned their guns on the Ultramarine ships, all of the ones that are now disabled and just stuck, shooting these ships down, absolutely annihilating them. And at this point, now that all of these ships are being absolutely blown to smithereens, the debris that this was creating was falling into orbit onto the planet. This was causing huge amounts of destruction, explosions, tsunamis, cities were getting flattened, I would assume. Just absolutely insane amounts of destruction going on here. So now that there's combat happening and nobody, like the Ultramarines have no idea what's going on, but there is combat happening. So the Ultramarines are looking to turn to the word bearers for support to face this unknown enemy together. But of course, that's not what the word bearers are here for. So this is when the ground troops of the word bearers turn on their brothers. And there is gunfire between camps of brothers that had been mustered together to fight off a last wave of orcs. In this first little bit here, 2 whole companies of the Ultramarines are wiped out, the 111th and the 112th. They are absolutely wiped on the feet. As far as I could find, there were none or very, very minor numbers of survivors. So while this chaos is all going on, Guilliman was on the bridge of his flagship Macragg's Honor, and being able to look down, I think his ship was disabled, but it hadn't been destroyed yet. So it's just kind of floating there, but they've still kind of got communications up, but the ship is toast. He's up on the Honor, and he realizes that it is in fact the word bearers that are shooting at his men. But again, like I said earlier, the concept of brother fighting brother is completely and totally alien to Guilliman, so he assumes that something's wrong, but in the way of this is a mistake. Lorgar doesn't realize what he's doing, sort of thing. So Guilliman reaches contact out to Lorgar and is pleading for Lorgar to cease fire, to hold the cannons, all that good stuff. And I won't say they were going back and forth, because Lorgar wasn't really interested in, letting... He was just letting Guilliman grovel, basically, having no control, no idea what was going on. After Guilliman had tried to talk to Lorgar and ask him to stop friendly fire, basically, Lorgar finally, they get on a lithocast, which I would assume is like a hologram chat, sort of like a hologram video chat, basically, as opposed to just talking over the comms. And at this point, Lorgar would outright refuse to cease fire. He's like, no, I'm not, I'm shooting you guys on purpose. And at this, Guilliman is absolutely and totally shell-shocked. This kind of puts him off for a minute. He's sort of in a daze, really, but then, the lithocast shuts off, and he takes a moment to collect himself, and at this moment, he would authorize his legion to defend themselves against the word bearers. He is authorizing, not that they want to fight the word bearers, but he is authorizing outright battle between the two legions, and this is where Mark Zero. This is Mark Zero. And just again, everything that I've said since the Campanile shooting through the shipyard, this is all only taken 20 minutes or so. But this is where, things are bad, but this is where things are about to get worse. So now the battle has officially started, but it hasn't fully quite broken out. We will go quickly back to the Ultramarine ship where Tachure and his warriors had just taken out about 18 men of high status that were on that ship, and they would go ahead and slaughter the rest of the crew of that ship. That was the Samothrace. And then he would signal for Cor Pharon, our second favorite only to Erebus. Yeah, he would signal for Cor Pharon to teleport on board that ship as well that they've just taken over. They would then put that ship, they would dock it into Calth's main defense platform, and now that they've taken over, they shut it down before, but now they're completely in control of it. The fleet of world bearers that were in orbit still would now descend into low orbit, and they could do that with no challenge, no interference from shields or anything like that. So they're just coming lower into the orbit, and at this point they begin bombarding the southern hemisphere of Calth with bombs and nukes and all of that fun stuff, and in a matter of minutes cause millions and millions of casualties, both Ultramarine lives and civilians that were just chilling on the planet as well. Within the first 2 hours, of the battle officially starting, Guilliman is going through all sorts of data. He's going through logs and communications and all this sort of stuff, information as much as he can get his hands on to try to figure out Lorgar's motivation behind this attack. And he eventually was able to find record of the word bearers boarding the Campanile and going on their massacre there. And at that point, he determined that this was premeditated. There was a plan in place. It wasn't just Lorgar having a temper tantrum. So after Guilliman has determined that Lorgar is doing this intentionally, maybe there's a bigger scheme at play, Guilliman, he did authorize the Ultramarines to defend themselves and fight back for the purpose of self-preservation, but at this point, when he determines that this was an intentional attack, he took back his pleas for Lorgar to stop the fighting, but he would send a new message at this point, and he vowed that he would not take this lightly and that he would kill his former brother Lorgar and the entire legion of the Word Bearers. This message happened to be the first one that Lorgar would actually respond to after ignoring Guilliman's pleas for mercy for so long, and Lorgar would respond to this message and was quite amused finally that Guilliman had figured it out. But Lorgar would go on to give Guilliman some more information, specifically that himself and the other Primarchs had already fallen to chaos and were working together with Horus, under Horus's lead, to rebel against the Emperor and be the downfall of the Empire, essentially. And Lorgar also took the time to explain what had happened on Istvan. Probably a brief sum up, because there probably wouldn't have been that much time for a full in-depth explanation, but he did tell Guilliman that they had already massacred the other Loyalist brothers and that Horus had sent him here to destroy the Ultramarines so that Horus could pursue his mission. At this point, Lorgar would hop off of the communications, and he didn't hop off of the communications at this point. Still communicating with Guilliman, Lorgar recited an incantation. He's now doing some chaos ritualistic something, and he summoned a swarm of demons that would just kind of appear and begin attacking Macragge's honor, specifically the bridge where Guilliman was, and they would break through the ship, and that would vent, like, space is a vacuum, and now that the ship is open, everyone's just kind of shot off into space. So that's not good. After the demons had taken out the bridge of the ship, Lorgar then leaves Corferon in charge of the siege of Calth, and sorry, not a siege, just the war, the battle, whatever you want to call it, because it's definitely not that much of a siege at this point. But Corferon is now in charge of dealing with Calth, and Lorgar would then take any of the word bearers who weren't currently engaged in combat, and they would head deeper into the Ultramar system to just have a grand old time causing chaos and havoc and just going on a bit of a bender there. Corferon, about 5 hours into the battle here, him and his posse of Magos, not Magos, sorry, but his posse of Psychers would completely take over Calth's weapons system, and they would use that to start shooting on the surrounding planets that were around Calth in the Viridian system, and specifically they were hitting the Viridia Forge, and this was an asteroid that orbited around Calth, I believe, that was a manufacturing asteroid world. So this was just an asteroid that had been turned into a large-scale factory. And at this point, chaos, all hell is about to break loose here, but I believe that is where I will leave the episode for today. We've gone over the beginning phases of the battle and the first sort of skirmishes that are going on here, and next week we will get into the nitty-gritty, the main meat and cheese of the battle, if you will, as well as the aftermath and some little side things that are going on while this main battle is happening. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me here today. We really appreciate everybody tuning in, and yeah, just quickly again, leave us a like if you liked what you heard, share us around. Thank you for joining us on the YouTube and watching us there, or listening on the Spotify, or wherever else you happen to be accessing this from. If you're listening on the Instagram, that's got to be some sort of magic, because honestly, we haven't really done any audio there yet. So yeah, unless, as Ethan says, if you're from the future, then hello from the past. Hopefully the future is not at the state that the Battle of Calth is at. Anywho, tune back in next week and I will continue to regale you on the tales of the Battle of Calth. Bye!